All right. Good afternoon and welcome to the first webinar on the Let's Go Designing Better Transit Together initiative. My name is Grant Sparks and I'm the Director of Planning for Chatham Area Transit. First, I'd just like to thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy days to learn about what will be the most significant transit project that our community has ever embarked on. Let's Go is a project that aims to meet the current transit needs of the Savannah and Chatham County area. Over the years, our community's economy and travel patterns have changed significantly, but our transit network has relatively remained the same. So needs have changed, but our services have not always been able to adapt to those changes. So as a result of this stagnation, ridership on our fixed routes has started declining, and that figure has been in more rapid decline over the last 18 months. To that end, CAT is launching this initiative to engage the community to get a better sense of what's working with the current transit network and what's not. So the end goal of this project will be to design new transit routes and schedules that align with our community's mobility needs. So with that, I'd just like to thank you again for participating in this webinar. We hope that you find the content valuable and informative. We also hope that you can help us spread the word about the project to your colleagues, friends, and family, because the success of this initiative really depends on community input such as yours. So now I'd like to introduce Michelle Poirot from Jarrett Walker and Associates, who's our lead consultant and expert on this project. Michelle?
Thank you very much, Grant. Yes, as Grant says, I'm the lead consultant on this project. My name is Michelle Poirot, and I work for a transit planning firm called Jarrett Walker and Associates. And all we do is help communities redesign their transit networks to better suit their values. So what I'm going to do today is give a short presentation. The presentation should take, I think, about 12 minutes. And then we're going to take some questions from the audience. And the way we'd like you to submit questions is using a little Q&A tool that's available as part of this webinar. So you should see something in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. And one of the options there is Q&A. There are two other tools that we're not going to use. One of them is chat and one of them is hand raise. So please don't use either of those, just use the Q&A box. And what we'll do is at the end of my little presentation, my colleague Denise Grabowski is going to read the questions out loud, those questions that haven't been answered through typing during the session. She's going to read them out loud and then I'll answer them out loud for everyone's benefit. And I should mention Denise is with a firm called Symbiosity, and she is in Savannah, lives in Savannah, and is helping us with community outreach on this project. So you may have already been in touch with Denise yourself, and that's why you're here. Okay, so with that, I'm going to get started with the presentation. Oh, I'm sorry, one more thing I should mention. We are going to record this, and that means that if you would like someone you know to listen to this webinar as well as to take the survey, you will be able to point them to this webinar on the project webpage, and more about that later. All right, so this is called the Let's Go Transit System Redesign, as Grant said. And why? Why do a network plan, and why do it now? Grant described how ridership has been falling over the last 18 months. And I'm showing you a little graph of ridership, total ridership in a number of different communities, including Savannah and Chatham County. That's the black line, Savannah and Chatham County. And as you can see, most of these lines are pointing somewhat downward since 2015. Transit ridership has been going down in many communities in the US for many reasons that have nothing to do with transit agencies. It's very inexpensive to get a car loan because of low interest rates. Gas was relatively cheap for a while, and then we're at full employment. Lots of people have jobs and therefore are able to afford cars. And finally, most of America is continuing to develop housing and jobs in places that are really designed to reach by car. They're really, really hard to get to by transit. And so this employment we have and this growth we have is not transit oriented. So for all those reasons, we do see transit ridership going down in many communities, including here. Which is not to say that transit ridership has to continue to go down or to stay low. That is something that a community can change. A community could redesign its transit network to get higher ridership if it wanted to. So I want to present 3 key choices to you, and these are the choices that we're focusing on in this phase of community outreach. And these are the choices that you'll find in the web survey if you haven't taken it yet. The first choice is walking or waiting. The second choice is what are your top priorities if there were any new funding. And then your third choice is should CAT redesign the transit network to achieve higher ridership? Because that isn't a given. I'll describe each of these in turn. Walking or waiting. You can deliver transit service in a way that minimizes walking. So in this little drawing, what you see is somebody's house, Ms. Smith's house, and 2 transit lines that go past her. They both go from somewhere out in the suburbs towards a downtown. And they're on 2 different streets, and one of them is very close to her, just a block. So she only has to walk 1 block to reach a bus stop. But both of those transit lines come once every hour. And that means that on average, she ends up spending half an hour waiting. She may not spend that waiting at the bus stop, but she might spend it at her destination. If she needs to be at work at 8:30 a.m., but her bus only comes once an hour and it delivers her there at 8:40 a.m., well, that's too late, and she has to arrive 50 minutes early. She has a medical appointment and the bus doesn't deliver her at just the right time for her medical appointment. She has to get there too early. So she has to wait a lot because the buses don't come very often. And her average wait is about 30 minutes. But she has a very short walk. So this is a way that you could design a network to give people very short walks. You put infrequent routes on many different parallel streets so that you get close to everybody. But there's another way you could design a network with the same amount of service. You could consolidate multiple routes onto fewer streets. So here you see that we've put both of those hourly routes onto a single street, and they're scheduled so that a bus comes every 30 minutes instead of every 60 minutes. But it's farther away from Ms. Smith's house. So now she has to walk farther, but once she reaches the bus stop, there's a bus coming twice as often. And the result is that she spends so much less time waiting that she actually gets to her destination sooner, or she gets to leave her house later and still get there on time. This is the same amount of transit service. This costs the transit agency the same amount to deliver, but the value they're delivering is very different. In one situation, the value they're delivering is short walks, and in the other, the value they're delivering is short waits. So this is a key trade-off that we want to consult you about, because different people will have different opinions about this for themselves and for the other people that they represent or for the people they think about. So this is one of the key choices about how to design a future network for CAT. The next key choice is top priorities. There are a number of ways that an agency can make investments whenever it has additional funding. Now, there is not additional funding on the table for CAT right now. I'm not asking this because we know about some change in the couch cushions that can be spent, but this is a really good way to find out what service aspects the community thinks are most important, or what service aspects are most underprovided today. So we want to know, if CAT discovered some new funding that they could spend on their network, how would you want them to spend it? They could spend it on wider coverage, meaning sending routes into places where there are no routes today. They could spend it on higher frequencies, so providing shorter waits for service. Or another way to say that is buses that get people to their destination closer to the time they actually want to be there. They could spend it on more service at night. They could spend it on more weekend service, especially on Sundays when many routes stop running. They could spend it making service more reliable so that buses are arriving more closer to the time that people expect them. Or they could spend it on bus shelters and other kinds of bus stop amenities that make the service a little more comfortable. So there's no technically correct answer to this question. We just want to get a sense of what you think is most needed in the system now. And then the third key choice is really a policy choice. And this is something that ultimately the CAT board of directors will contemplate. And they've actually already started thinking about it in recent years. And that is higher ridership really what people want? And is higher ridership the right goal for this CAT network redesign? High ridership is valued by many people. High ridership is what gives us reductions in congestion, reductions in people's average transportation costs. It's what can save large numbers of households the cost of owning a car. It can have the most economic impact by getting workers to jobs. But there are other values for transit that don't arise from high ridership that are really important, such as insurance against isolation. If you have a bus route out in someone's neighborhood and hardly anyone ever rides it, maybe that's okay, because the reason it's there is to protect those people from being stranded. If they have an injury that prevents them from driving, or if they lose their car, they still have some basic mobility, some way of getting out of their neighborhood and reaching service. So high ridership isn't always the thing that people value when they are transit supporters. You can be a transit supporter and care about things other than ridership. But something that we really need to understand is that these transit goals actually conflict. They come into conflict when we try to maximize them within a fixed budget. And so I'm going to describe for you why that is using a fictional example. Imagine we have this little town, or let's say it's a medium town, and we're just looking at a neighborhood, a big neighborhood in here. And those two main roads have lots of little people and jobs and businesses clustered around them. That's where you see all those black dots on those two main roads. And then we have these smaller roads with fewer people and fewer jobs and fewer houses on them. We are the transit agency, and we have 18 buses that we can deploy through this neighborhood. Where should we put them? How should we design our service? If we're told that high ridership is the absolute goal, we should maximize ridership relative to our investment, we will design a certain type of service through this neighborhood. We will put all of our buses on the main roads that have the most people and the most jobs nearby. We will be thinking like a business, which means we choose the markets we can enter. And we enter the markets where transit can be competitive. There's lots of people, it's walkable, and we can provide direct service that goes past lots of useful stuff. Because we've put all of our buses on just these main roads, that also means that these bus routes are very frequent. There's a bus always coming soon, so people can travel when they want to travel. And that makes the service even more competitive. So the way we would describe the success of this service is we'd say it gets high ridership. It is very productive because it gets so much ridership relative to the cost we're bearing. But of course, take a look at this little network in this neighborhood and you'll see there are people, there are houses and jobs that are not on a bus route. That may be a really long walk from a bus route or maybe an impossible walk from a bus route. There aren't very many of them, but they may have severe needs for transit. What about them? We're leaving them behind. We're leaving them out. If we were to design a network so that we didn't leave anybody out, so that everybody had access to some service, then we would just design a network like this one. We would design for a coverage goal, some service for everyone. We would take our 18 buses and we would put them on every street or almost every street. Even those streets that don't have very many people on them or that are very curvy or hard to walk across, we would be on those streets because we want to make sure everyone is close to service in case they need it. Because we've divided our service into many, many lines, each of those lines represents service not coming very often. It is not frequent, and maybe it doesn't run at nights or it doesn't run on weekends. So people can't travel when they want to travel. It's not competitive, and that means we don't get very many riders. But that doesn't matter because we designed this network not for high ridership. We designed it for coverage. We designed it to get a little bit of service close to everyone. And so we would say this network gets 100% of residents and jobs near some service, and that's its purpose. These two goals, a ridership goal and a coverage goal, are really valued by many people. They're very important, but they actually lead us in opposite directions when we're doing transit planning and when we're designing a network. The more we design for frequent service that's competitive, that focuses on where lots of people are, the less we are designing to get a little bit of service close to everyone, and vice versa. So every transit agency is somewhere on a spectrum between maximizing ridership and maximizing coverage. And CAT is sort of in the middle of the spectrum. About half of the budget is spent on services that get high ridership, and about half of the budget is spent on services that don't get high ridership, but they're there not for high ridership, they're there to cover important places and important people. So this is a trade-off we would like your input on. And it really relates, the way you can tell us about this is you can tell us how important close walks are to you, short walks versus short waits. You can tell us how important frequent service is, and night service and weekend service, because those are all things that would lead us to higher ridership, but they trade off against wider coverage. And so you can also tell us in that question about priorities, how important wide coverage is to you, because that trades off against higher frequencies, night service, and higher ridership. So this is a policy level choice. It's not really about your individual experience as a bus rider, but it is important to the agency. For more information about this, you can go to our project website, letsgo.catchacat.org. And that is someplace that you can find a link to take the web survey. Please do if you haven't yet taken it. Please have your friends and your family take it. Share it on social media. And if you know anyone who would rather take it in Spanish, we also have it available there in Spanish. If you're really interested in this and you also want to learn more about the existing CAT transit system, go and read the Choices Report. It is linked from the resources section of the project webpage. If you have comments and questions, you can send those to us at the email address is letsgo@catchacat.org. You'll also find that on the project website. And then this phase of public consultation, we're going to wrap up in a couple of weeks. But there's actually going to be a second phase in the spring, likely in April, and we're going to have a different type of question for you, and we hope that you will engage again at that time. And continue to participate until the end of this project, which might be the end of 2019 or might even go into 2020. So thank you so much for the attention you've paid to us, and if there are any questions, I will be very happy to answer those here, or later if you prefer to send them to our email address. And I'm going to let Denise tell me if there are any questions that we should answer live during this webinar. Okay, it looks like all the questions got answered during the webinar. So let us know if you have any other questions or if you'd like some particular assistance with outreach or any other kinds of events. You can contact us at the website. Denise, is there anything you'd like to add about further community in the next couple of weeks?
So we did have one question that was asked that was answered, but if you can speak to whether or not we have availability to make a presentation like this to a particular community group or organization.
Sure, that's the kind of thing that CAT staff can probably assist with. So please send those types of requests to letsgo@catchacat.org and you will hear back from CAT staff.
Great. And we also had another question that was provided. Doesn't low ridership and high coverage service lead to lower fare revenues?
That is a great question. Yes, lower ridership does lead to lower fare revenues. Now, that does have impacts on how much revenue the agency has to work with to spend on service and other things, but it doesn't have a big impact because for all transit agencies, fares only recover somewhere between 0 and 25% of the cost of providing service. And especially in smaller cities like Savannah, it's nowhere near 25%. So it's very normal for fares to only recover a little bit of the cost of providing service, and we don't charge fares to fund the service. The service is funded through other sources like the federal and county governments, in some places the state government. But that is a consequence to be aware of, that as ridership goes down, that small amount of fare revenue does also go down. Thank you for that great question.
We've also had another question come in. Is there a current media program that touches the current riders of CAT, such as flyers on the buses? And I'll actually start with this one, and Grant and Michelle, please chime in. We do have flyers on all of the CAT buses currently, and we also have the survey that is available at the CAT Central location at 900 East Gwinnett Street from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. for those without computer access. We are also going to be doing additional outreach to ensure that we get good representation from the current riders of CAT, especially in this first phase of our survey. Grant or Michelle, anything to add?
Yeah, this is Grant. Just kind of touching on that. So obviously our first big push to reach the community is through this first community survey. And so the survey can be accessed on our website, which Michelle provided the link earlier. We do have flyers on all of our buses, as you mentioned, Denise, and you can stop by our offices to fill out the survey as well. We will also be on the buses and out in the community asking our current riders and future riders what their thoughts are by administering the survey. So we're going to give folks many opportunities to fill out the survey, but if you would like the link sent to you or any materials that will help distribute or get the word out rather about the survey, we'd be happy to provide your organization with those materials. So just send us an email to the letsgo@catchacat.org email address.
Great. And the survey does close February 10th, so just to keep that on your radar screen as well. And a follow-up question to one of the earlier ones. So isn't it in the best interest of CAT to provide higher ridership service?
And this is related to fare revenue. So if lower ridership means less fare revenue, then isn't it in the best interest of CAT to provide higher ridership service? That requires some thinking about what is the interest of CAT. CAT is not a person, and CAT does not have interests of its own. CAT is here to serve the community. And that means understanding what goals the community wants it to achieve. Transit does not need to earn money. Transit is not a business. It's a public service like libraries and schools and sewers and so on. It does something valuable, and for that, we raise money for it. Fares are just one small source of money that we raise for transit. Many transit agencies, especially in small cities and rural areas, decide that their purpose is not high ridership. They're not going to compete with cars. Their purpose is a last resort service for people who have a severe need for transit for whatever reason. And some of them even stop charging fares because they recognize that fares are a barrier to riding for people who might not have the money, or for people who just don't have the exact change or get frustrated by the uncertainty of how much they're supposed to pay and how they pay and so on. So CAT could, if the public said to CAT, don't worry about ridership, be close to everyone, just as insurance in case people need the service. That would mean that CAT's interest is the interest of the community, and what's would have been expressed is that the community wants low ridership, high coverage, last resort kind of system. If the community says, no, high ridership is important, we want a lot of people's lives to be touched by this transit system. We want transit to be relevant to our economy and to our development patterns and to the life of the city in a big way, well, then CAT's interest is the interest of the community, which is get high ridership, be relevant in that way, compete with driving for many people. Fare revenue is just a small part of the revenues that CAT uses, and it's important to notice and plan for any drop in fare revenue. But the real purpose of CAT is delivering a valuable service that's good for the community, the same way the purpose of schools and sewers and parks is to deliver a valuable service. And they will plan for the necessary, budgetary measures, depending on whether they're told by the community that their purpose should be higher ridership or their purpose should be wider coverage. That's a great question. Thank you so much for asking that.
All right, we don't have any more questions in our chat box, so if anyone else has any questions they would like to ask, if you could please enter those in the question and answer box.
Okay, well, we're happy to take more questions at letsgo@catchacat.org later. And as Denise and Grant said, any requests for a presentation or materials, send them over to there. And please, everybody, take the survey, send the survey to your friends, put it on your Facebook or your Twitter, and help us get the word out. We want a really wide and diverse group of people to give us input in this project. Thank you again for your time and your attention. Thank you, Denise and Grant, for joining me in this. And you will hear from us again this spring. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.